So what, Eric? I think maybe we ought to elaborate a little bit more on the last video. So what does it matter? What stuff do we got to do? What's he say? What's the stuff that he says we got to do to get this ball rolling? I mean, we've been doing it. We've been trying. Just not there yet. Maybe enough people. We got to get more people on board. More people convinced. More people that got to get the blinders on and blot out the distractions.
There's this little ism thing that I say that asks that question. How many of who has to do what, when, for how long, with what heart, before you might say it actually makes a difference, or before you'll actually see, or before Yahweh will actually do what he promised to do. I maintain that the effect of everything we do is instantaneous and fully effective, which is to say, just because we don't know how to measure, how to quantify the effect is still going out there, that the effect is still happening. But of course you're asking, when will we see the effect or notice the effect? And that's where Yahweh has said, don't ask for the day of Yahweh, because when it happens, it's going to be terrible and devastating.
Thick darkness.
Thick darkness. I had mentioned the book of Joel. So let's look at that real quick.
But there has been time in history where he said that I sought for a man to stand in the gap. I couldn't find anybody.
What about Yeshua? Couldn't you even find him?
Well, he stood in the gap for sure. You know what I'm saying.
In chapter 1 of the book of Joel, it talks about a nation has come up against my land, mighty and without number. The teeth are the teeth of a lion. Rendered my vine desolate, my fig tree a source of despair. Yahweh is talking about the ruin of his people. It starts off in chapter 2. Blow the shofar in Zion, sound the trumpet on my Kadosh mountain. Let all the inhabitants of the land tremble, for the day of Yahuwah has come. It is upon us. It is near. A day of darkness, thick darkness, a day of cloud and thick cloud spreading over the mountains like dawn, which is just swarming, moving, nothing to stop it. But he goes on to describe it. He later says it's locusts. At the end of verse 2, my great army that I sent among you, the abundant locust, the chewing locust, the demolishing locust, and the cutting locust. Kind of not exactly funny, but I know that there's a song that people sing in church. They rush on the city, they run on the wall, great is the army that carries out his word. And yet he's talking about grasshoppers. He's not talking about onward Christian soldiers, unless he had used the Christian armies to swarm into Jerusalem and slaughter all the people of Israel that were living there. They might have been that. Because are these 4 types of locusts metaphorical, or are they actually grasshoppers? But Yahuwah himself says...
Of course, a lot of people would say that's Islam.
Maybe it is. Chapter 2, verse 11, Yahweh has emitted his voice in advance of his army. His camp is very numerous, for those who carry out his word are mighty, for the day of Yahweh is great and awesome, and who will be able to bear it? Verse 11, even now, Nam Yahweh. Remember, every time you say Nam Yahuwah, it's like this signet ring stamped where he's ratifying it. He's giving it that signature with the imperial pen. No doubt. Return to me with all your heart, with fasting, weeping, and lamentation. Rend your hearts and not your garments, and return to Yahweh El-Heka, Yahweh your Elohim. For he is gracious and merciful, slow to anger, of great kindness, and he relents of evil. But many places he said he himself brings the evil, causes the evil, does the evil, calls in evil. Whoever knows, let him repent and regret. Let's have a remorse, and it will leave a blessing behind it. What does that mean? The rabbinical commentary says it will leave a blessing behind it means even after the locusts have swarmed through, that he will turn even the devastation into a reason which could be seen as a good thing. For example, there's a few types of plants, the redwood and the manzanita, where they can't break open their seeds unless there's a forest fire. It's because of the fire, which is devastating, that the new generation grows. That's just a story, a parable in nature. Have pity, Yahweh, verse 17, upon your people. Let not your heritage, there again, once again, as we said in the previous video, that Israel is the heritage of Yahuwah. Let not your heritage be an object of scorn for nations to dominate them, which is exactly what he set up as the part of the punishment. So as we see perpetuating even still as of 2016, foreign, heathen, non-Torah observant nations who care nothing for Yahuwah or his word dominate over the people of Israel. Why should they say among themselves, where is their God? Then, this is the then that we are looking forward to. Yahuwah will take up the cause of his land and take pity on his people. Yahweh will reply and say to his people, remember this reply, this reciprocal. We do something, then he does something. If we turn our ears away from him, he actually says he will not hear our prayers. So people who think, well, everybody should pray, he says if you don't hear the Torah, then as a mirror, as a reciprocal action, he will not hear our prayers.
It's even worse than that. He said their prayers are an abomination.
Prayers are an abomination if you don't regard his words. Not everybody.
He also says that in a time of distress you call on me and I'll rescue you. And then in the next verse it talks about, who are you to call on me if you despise the words of my covenant?
So not everybody has access to his ear.
Exactly.
Yahweh will reply and say to his people, behold, I am sending you the grain and the wine and the oil, and you will be satisfied or filled full, sated from it, and I will no longer make you a disgrace among the nations. So here is a promise of him restoring his favor to his people. I will distance the northern one from you. This is written rather cryptically. What is the northern one? And I will banish it to an arid and desolate land, its face to the eastern sea, its rear to the western sea. What does that mean? Its foul odor will ascend and its stench will go out, for it is done great. Is he talking about the grasshoppers now? Fear not, O land, exult and be glad, for Yahuwah has done great. Again, if you read this in English, it's almost poetic, but you notice the sentences aren't necessarily written the way we think in English. It seems disjointed. So, I took some time a couple weeks ago to go through and translate those same words, verses 18 to 21. And as I've said before, if anybody is genuinely interested, I don't know if you can see that, but I can show you word for word where this comes from, where this translation, how I rendered this translation. Take a photocopy of it, mail it to you, or we could even make a video, which I've done in the past, showing every one of these words, what it means and how I figure it. And if somebody wants to say, that's not how you do it, then fine, come up with your own way. I don't care. I'm just trying to tell you what I see, and if someone would choose to see something different, perhaps there's multiple ways to read this text, but I believe this is genuinely one way that this text could be read and understood. Yahweh proclaimed to the whole earth, made a public spectacle about the fact that he would have warm compassion upon his special chosen people. Verse 19. Yahweh craves this dynamic of their relationship so much that he declares to his people, hey, look here, here I am, sending forth to you a constant supply, numerous dispatches, a continuous supply of provisions, and you might expect a constant flood of UPS, FedEx, Wells Fargo wagons. He's constantly sending things to his people. The inheritance will be possessed by the ones who want it enough to wake up and pay attention. The proclamation was declared in public, perfectly clear to everyone. There was no tricks, no shenanigans. He put his declarations regarding his attitude, his heart, towards his people, that they would be called his chosen people, his heritage, and he made the whole world know about it. When it is searched out, it will be found to be exactly as promised, perfectly ordered as stated, aleph-tav as notated. And again, the aleph-tav is the whole matter in its perfect, succinct entirety, word for word, note for note. There is no tonic, no other teaching. I would dare say not even any other covenant, by which you all can be relieved of the constant reproach, scorn, disgrace, reviling, spite at the hand of the goyim. And again, this is persisting even till today. Cousin Ishmael and his favorite religion that those people have been sucked into, naming Islam, are the chief, well, I should say so is Christianity and Judaism. All three of those religions hate the people of Yahuwah, known as Israel. If you look real close, and they are the hands of the goyim that have reproach, scorn, disgrace, and reviling spite against the people of Yahuwah. Aleph-tav encodes the secret, hidden, concealed, hoped for, expected. You may not know this, but when it says the northern, that word northern is zephon. And so when I say you may not know this, it's because the word zephon means encoded, secret, hidden, concealed, hoped for, and expected. But it's translated simply northern. It's as in the word Zephaniah. Zephaniah is that hidden secret. So if I choose to translate it as instead of saying the word northern, I'm suggesting that there's another way to read this, which is Yahweh's got something hidden. And then Yahweh speaking here.
Imagine that.
I will keep the way of life far away distant. Your, speaking to Israel, your elevation will be deferred. Your respect postponed, pushed off, even to the extent that the earth languishes in drought, dried up in demented, depressed desolation, starving and strangling itself in appalling horrors. And I would say what that looks like to me today is the chemtrails, the oils in the oceans, the dead zones in the oceans, the genetically modified plant life, the people getting vaccinated and losing their minds to be able to even function as a credible human. More and more things are being destroyed on the face of the earth by the enemies, the Fukushimas, the enemies, and besides the wars with the uranium-tipped ballistics which destroy the genetics of the people who are in the land, and on and on and on, until Israel turns back to the covenant of Yahuwah. This says, starving and strangling itself in appalling horrors, the earth will dry up in demented, depressed desolation, languishing in drought. And whose fault is it? Is it those bad guys? Is it the NWO? Is it our leaders? No, it's us. It's Israel's fault for not turning with all their heart and all their soul to Yahuwah, as he says in Deuteronomy 30, and not listening, taking to heart, heeding, and performing what he said. Those are, I'm using his verbs, which are in his book. It goes on to say, the original preliminary hypothesis being swept away. Now I would say that that's the terms of the covenant as he gave to his people back in Deuteronomy. They were fed that it was not the future. As we mentioned before, the whole world has forgotten that Yahweh ever gave his people a future, and we've been told that, oh, this mistress of Babylon will rule to the end, and that the promised blessing, the Messianic era, that Brother Yehuda, the Jews, they look forward to this. The return of prestige as promised stinks. It's a bygone doctrine of no present concern. What did Yahweh say in the Old Testament? So what? So what? It doesn't matter what he said. Oh, we've got a new covenant. We've got a different Messiah. Oh, we're a different people group. We don't have to do anything, he said. Oh, it's all under the blood. Nothing we can do. We have imputed righteousness. That is not what he said. That was not the terms of the original covenant. So what? Either this stuff is true, and all that other stuff we've been fed is a damn dirty lie, or Yahweh himself, when he says, "No, I'm Yahweh," himself is the lie. Who is it that lied? Is it Yahweh, or is it the men who seem to claim they represent him? It stinks so much because of the doctrine that greatness is imputed, that righteousness is imputed, that cleanliness is imputed. He said it's what we do, it's what we harbor in our hearts.
But brother, don't you know when God looks at you, all he sees is you covered in Jesus' blood?
You've learned the doctrines well, grasshopper.
If
we're talking about locusts and grasshoppers?
If you try to obey, you're mocking his sacrifice. That's dangerous ground.
I've heard those words.
I have too.
Verse 21. Do not make me aware of earth rejoicing with gladness, which Yahweh said he was going to make happen, that according to how we are instructed, the land, the manifestation of the conditions of the earth, resembles my generation's authority to assign payment as due accordingly. That means if we do perversely, the land will languish. If we do righteousness, the land will thrive. It's up to us. When Yahweh said he called his people Elohim, translated as gods or mighty ones, we are causal agents by our words, by what we harbor in our minds and our hearts, and by what we do with our hands to make things right. We are empowered by him, by covenant, at his word, to change the face of the earth, in the political realm as well as the cultural realm, and most especially to bring back the covenant such that when he says, I will make your enemies afraid of you, and I will turn the imprecations of this curse from being upon you for the last 3,000 years, 2,730, I'm going to put them on your enemies and chase them down the way that they chased you when they had the opportunity.
That's doing the good stuff.
It's coming. It's at the door. Last phrase, thus the magnificence of Yahweh is forgery, regarded with intrepidation. What does this mean? The way I take these words to mean is that Yahweh's character and nature has been manipulated, convoluted, distorted by human hands, by manufacturing, changing his face to be not what he told us, to be something completely different. And the only way to know what his face is to go back and look at his words.
Christianity has pretty much adopted, and they won't admit it, but the Marcion aspect of...
Who's Marcion? What is that?
That heretic that said, oh, that God of the Old Testament, he's a demiurge, he's just bloodthirsty, he's just wicked, but we have Jesus now. Just forget about that stuff there. We've got Jesus. It's just peace and love and harmony. He's going to take care of everything for us. Really not much we can do.
So you're saying that Marcion was like the authors of early Christianity?
Responsible in getting that middle page in the scriptures.
The white page between Malachi and Matthew.
Between the Old Testament, which is, you get a testament, that's a dead person, that's their last will and testament, that's gone. We have a New Testament now. Whole new set of rules, whole new ball game now. That old thing just died, passed away.
A friend of mine has a Bible that says right in the front, Holy Bible. You open it up and it starts with Matthew. This here is the Old Testament. It has this. He has no access to any of these words. So, on account of that, I wanted to take a few minutes here to read through some highlights of Jeremiah. Certainly, if you have the Old Testament, the Tanakh, which actually is an acronym, TNK stands for Torah, T, Nevi'im, which is prophets, and Ketuvim, which is the K sound, which is the writing. So the Tanakh is basically the instructions, the prophets, and the writings. And the prophet's job was to tell you to go back to the instructions, and the writings were poetic stories telling you what happened when people didn't go back to the instructions, thus encouraging you to go back to the instructions. So the Torah, the first 5 books, is basically where it's all at. And the first 2 books of the Torah, Genesis and Exodus, are basically history, establishing where the family came from. And so the instructions that really zero us into what does Yahweh expect of us, what does He tell us to do, because they're the most important matters, are actually in Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. And as I've mentioned before, sometimes those 3 books are sometimes not even taught in Christian colleges. They don't even teach. Some colleges don't even teach those 3 books. I'm going to just peruse through Jeremiah. Jeremiah. Ram means to be elevated, or to rise up, to be great. It's where you get the word Rome, or Romulan in Star Trek. I have a friend named Rommel. That comes from the same root. He will rise up unto Yah, or Yah will rise him up, or Yah will rise up is where you get the word for Jeremiah, otherwise known as Jeremiah. Yahweh says to him, "Do not fear them, for I am with you to rescue you." Nam Yahweh. Now, he's not talking to me or you, he's talking to Jeremiah here. But to show you some of the things, this is Yahweh's sentiment. He says, listen, these guys are going to be raging against you, they're going to threaten you, they're going to even throw you in the well and in the dungeon to be killed, but do not be afraid of them. I have empowered you, but he still allows stuff to happen. Verse 11, he said, what do you see? He says, I see an almond tree. Yahweh said to me, very well, for I hasten to fulfill my word. What's that got to do with an almond tree? This is a little clue as the way the Hebrew works. The exact same word for almond, which is spelled Shin Kuf Dalet, Shakad, literally means industrious, diligent, watchful, awake, and zealous. So when he says, I'm showing you an almond tree, what are you supposed to get out of this? Almonds? Almond milk? No, the word almond means diligent, industrious, zealous. And he says, I am zealous over my word. Okay, right here, this tells us something. This tells us that there's at least 2 different ways to read the scriptures. One is the obvious, and the other one is implied and inferred. So I've said, you can't go back and necessarily see in the Old Testament Tanakh where the Messiah is prophesied, because he doesn't do it on the surface. But the implications are everywhere. But you have to know Hebrew, and you have to know what you're looking at. And that's why I'm encouraging people to read Hebrew, because of stuff like this. And it's this verse right here that proves the point. Yahweh showed him the vision of an almond and said, just like that word, which also means this attitude, he says, I hasten. It's not just the word hasten. Industrious, diligent, awake, zealous. It's this passionate, just like that word he's going to send in, what we read earlier, the vulture, the ayin yod tet, to screaming in a rush. That's the attitude. Yahweh wants to just scream in with a rush to fulfill what he said, and he's waiting for us. I won't read all the chapters and verses. I'm just going to read some highlights here, but I'm just trying to give you this heart of Yahweh, what he's wanting to do. I shall pronounce my judgments against Judah for all their evil. Why? Why? What evil did they do? They have forsaken me and burned incense to Elohim Achrim. That's the way it's phrased, gods of others or other gods. And prostrated themselves to their own handiwork. And he talks about many other places. You go out, you dig up gold, or you get a tree, you chop it down, you carve it, you put gold on it, and then you bow in front of it. It's nothing. Or it represents some other deity, and as we read in the last video we just did, he says, there are no other Elohim. There's none like me. Certainly we know from experience that there seems to be this hierarchy, like an echelon of powers and principalities. But they're created beings. They're angels, they're demons, or whatever we want to call them, spirits. And but they're not him. They're not Elohim. He called us Elohim in Hebrew, but we didn't create anything. He's given power of influence and cause to affect, to bring about an effect. He has given that to humans and to these other spirits, but there is none like him. There is no other Elohim in his capacity. They will wage war against you, but will be unable to defeat you, for I am with you, Nam Yahweh, to rescue you. Again, he's talking to Jeremiah, but it's this attitude which is our obligation of his people to take on. Regardless of the size of the giants, how much money, how much weapons, the positions of power and authority, or even the host of invisible spirits, principalities, space aliens, whatever they might appear as, Nephilim, they're not Yahuwah, and there's none his equal. Thus said Yahweh, I recall for you the kindness of your youth, the love of your nuptials, you following me into the wilderness, into an unsown land. Israel is kadosh, set apart, betrothed unto Yahuwah, the first of his crop. So he still has some other crop. All who devour it, meaning Israel, will be held guilty. Evil shall come upon them, Nam Yahweh. Why hasn't evil appeared to come upon those who devour his crop? Because Israel has turned away from the instructions of Yahweh. Israel turned away, they distanced themselves from me and pursued fertility. They pursued futility, the nothingness. He has substance. To pursue any other deity or any other power or any other purpose in life is absolute futility, and they became futile. You pursue Yahuwah and you become like him. You pursue anything counter to him and you become as empty and as void and as worthless as those matters which you pursue. But they did not say, where is Yahweh who brought us up from the land of Egypt? Who led us in the wilderness, a land of desert and pit, and a land of waste and shadow of death, a land through which no man passed and no person settled. I brought you into a fruitful land. What it's saying here, I believe, is that they're saying, where is Yahweh who did all these incredible, miraculous exploits on behalf of his people? Why aren't we seeing them anymore? Why don't we see the good stuff? Why don't we see the miracles? Why don't we see our enemies fall? But you came and contaminated my land and made my heritage into an abomination. The priests, the Kohanim, did not say, where is Yahweh? Those charged with teaching the people did not know me. The shepherds rebelled against me. The prophets prophesied by the Baal. That word Baal means Lord or Master, which are these lesser deities, the God of the mountain, the Lord of the valley, the Neptune of the sea, that type of thing. The prophets prophesied by these lesser spirit principalities, and they went after those that cannot avail. Therefore I will yet contend with you, Nam Yahweh, and with your children's children, you could say that's us. Observe, send forth, consider deeply. My people has exchanged its glory for something of no avail. Be astounded, O heavens, over this. Rage forth in storm. The word of Yahweh. For my people has committed two evils. They have forsaken me, the source of living water, and they have dug for themselves cisterns, broken cisterns, that cannot hold the water. Is Israel a slave? Is he born to a house? Why has he become prey? Because you forsake Yahweh your Elohim when he leads you on the path. Your evil shall castigate you, your waywardness shall chasten you. What he's saying is that your own behaviors are the evil that come against you, as we said before. When you see your enemy coming against you, it's your own finger in the mirror until it actually touches itself. And your enemy at your door is your own ways upon you. That's what Yahweh keeps telling you. My point is this. You could keep going through Jeremiah. That's just not even the first two chapters. I would encourage everyone to take the time to sit and look at Jeremiah and read this as if he was talking to us today, not a people on the other side of the world 3,000 years ago, speaking a different language in another culture. It has nothing to do with us because we have a new Savior and a new religion and a new covenant. If we go back and read this, he says in chapter 3, verse 4, if only from now on you would call me my Father, you are the master of my youth. Would he bear a grudge forever or keep in mind eternally? Nevertheless, behold, you spoke and carried out evil deeds as much as you could. All through here, Yahweh is saying, I keep giving you the answer. I keep giving you the solution. Call me my Father. How many people say, Lord, Lord, we did things in your name. Oh, Holy Father, we do this, we do that. And he says, you have no idea. You continue to do evil. You don't know what it means for me to be your father. Yeshua said, if Abraham was your father, you do the things Abraham did. If you call me my Father, the word Ab, which is father, Ava, also means the one who has a passionate desire to either want something or refuse against something with an energy, a zeal. Yahweh says, I am zealous over my stuff. Chapter 3, verse 19, and I said, call me my Father. Do not turn away from behind me. But, like a woman who is unfaithful to her mate, you have been unfaithful to me, O house of Israel. Our family history is one of corruption and continual betrayal. He says numerous times, we have done lying, stealing, and killing. Ephraim's history is these three things which we perpetuate today. One last thing here. If you repent, O Israel, Nam Yahweh, you will return to me. If you remove your abominations from before me, then you will not have to wander, banished. If you swear, as Yahweh lives, in truth, in justice, and in righteousness, that's Emet, Mishpat, and Zadikah, the nations will bless themselves through Israel and will praise themselves through it. What he's saying is, the way to get back to where everything works is to go back to what he said and just start doing it.
Didn't we go over something in a previous video about where he speaks about going to do a new thing, the woman shall encompass the man?
That's in Jeremiah 31. That's right there where we were talking about set up for yourselves.
He's so fed up with it, he said, look, I'm not going to pursue you. I'm tired of this. You've let me down so many times. You chase me.
Jeremiah 31, verse 21. As we said in the last video, and as I said in that article that I wrote about the Shields Project, which, by the way, like I said, you could go to Bill Sanford's site, or anybody could email me at paleo, P-A-L-E-O, Sefer, S-F-R.com, paleosfr.com, and we will email you the Shields Project email. It's 163 pages with a bunch of pictures in it. Anyway, make road markers for yourself, set up landmarks for yourself, set the thoughts of your heart upon the road, the route that you are walking. Return, O maiden of Israel, return to these cities of yours. How long will you slip away, O wayward daughter? For Yahweh has created something new in the world, that the woman will court the man, or surround the man, or encompass the man. My take on looking at these words and trying to figure out what they mean, just from my analysis, is that the feminine will envelop the masculine. In the past, as you said, Yahweh has always been the knight, the champion, the hero. He sees Israel in distress, and he comes rushing in to save her. And Yahweh put his Mishkan, his encampment, his presence, right in the middle of the camp of Israel, told Israel to encamp around him. But here, he's basically, I believe, saying that Israel will instigate Yahweh's virility. Israel will find what Yahweh, picture this as Yahweh's pleasure, Yahweh's desire, Yahweh's where he's at, his Shem, his aleph-tav. And Israel says, I'm gonna just embrace this, wrap around it, and I'm gonna do what I hear doing.
So that's, so what?
So what? So what? As Yahweh said, he's going to turn this world upside down. He's going to restore his favor. He's going to bless his people and give them the supremacy over the entire earth. And all the other nations will stand in awe, not because his people are so fantastic, but because of how Yahweh will back his people. And the grief and when Yahweh turns his face against those other nations, which he has let sit in the custodian seat all these years, you won't even remember the way the last 3,000 years have been. And when I read these words, and he says, Nam Yahweh, Nam Yahweh, so what is everything?
I'm going to blow the shofar.
It's inside.
Thanks, brother.